I could have a little wish for my anniversary and also for my birthday that is coming up, I would like to hear a bit more from you. I'd love to know more what you think about how I see clearing clutter, how I talk about it here on a podcast. I would like to hear more what questions you have and what topics you would love me to cover here on the podcast. Well, hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the From Chaos to Peace podcast, where I talk about how clutter is so much more than you think, and we put a spiritual twist on clearing that clutter to get organized. Thank you so much for allowing me back into your ears. Well, hello, my friend. Welcome to this episode. I'm your host, Conny Graf, and am I excited that you're here? Why? Here we are. If you listen to this podcast or this episode as it's coming out on February 17, 2025, then today is the 5-year anniversary of this podcast. And it's really wild that exactly 5 years ago today, on February 17, 2020, the first episode went live. That was before we all ended up in lockdown, by the way. I had talked about it before, how I had procrastinated on launching this podcast for years. And then when I realized that I was for the third time on the same webinar that Pat Flynn was hosting on how to start a podcast, I really realized I had to set myself a deadline and actually get to work. So the deadline was March 3rd, 2020. That's my birthday. And so I released the first episode February 17, as I said just minutes ago. The second, February 20th. The third, February 24th. And the fourth episode on March 2nd. And voila, on my birthday, I had a podcast with 4 published episodes. Now, this is not necessarily the best way to launch a podcast, I know, but it was how I did it because I was still worried and I was very nervous because I was always thinking like, who am I to have a podcast? And so my launch was not really a launch. I just quietly published some episodes. And then I think on my birthday, I did put out a social media post about a podcast, but I don't think anybody really realized it because I was so quiet and held back about it. It still took probably a few weeks, I think, before I actually started to really talk about my podcast, really promote my podcast. So again, not the most ideal way to launch a podcast, but that's what I did. And here we are 5 years later and 255 episodes in. And there were really moments when I felt like throwing in the towel, especially last year, 2024. It was really, really hard. And I was really not looking forward to having to post podcast as the episodes. And the reason was that thanks to some changes that Apple and Spotify did, the downloads dropped significantly. And it was really frustrating, to say the least. And I was really questioning too if it makes sense to produce a podcast or an episode every week when hardly anybody was listening. And while I love having a podcast, it is really a lot of work, and it's not just the production of this audio, it's also marketing afterwards and editing, of course, after recording it, and getting guests to want to share their expertise on the podcast, and on and on. And I don't want to complain. I wanted to have a podcast, but it has to make sense somehow, right? And I did realize that the decline in downloads wasn't just unique to my podcasts. At least that much I could figure out. There was a lot of podcasts that experienced a drop in downloads because Apple iOS 17, that came out in September 2023, introduced changes that had an impact on the downloads. And then also they changed, and I don't know whether that was Apple or Spotify that started with that, but there was a shift from subscribe to my podcast to follow my podcast. And while they wanted to make it more obvious to the listener that subscribe doesn't mean they have to pay, that it is for free, and so they changed to follow, it really created some confusion too, and I don't know, they changed something in the algorithm anyway, so that also contributed to the drop in downloads as far as I could figure out in my research. And so that was really, like last year, that was really a hard year. It was a drag. And Alex Sanfilippo from PodMatch, he publishes a podcast report every month. And while there is an overall big buzz about podcasts, and it's rising, like there is more and more people also that want to start a podcast this year, and the listenership is really healthy. There's more and more people listening to podcasts. The overall podcasters' health is low, Alex says, because there is a high failure rate. And I hear that too. There's so many podcasters that don't make it past episode 7. And there's another big chunk of podcasters that don't make it past their first year. So I link to this report in the show notes. You can go check it out if you're interested. But I'm just mentioning this, that the fact that I'm actually still here 5 years and 255 episodes later is something I'm truly proud of, even though it was hard to still be here. It is a testament to my determination. And maybe it's not determination. I was wondering when I was pondering about this, maybe it's just sheer stubbornness. Who knows? Because follow through doesn't always come easy for me. My dominant element is fire. So there has been plenty of things that I've started and never finished. Typical fire energy, right? We're excited. We want to start something. And then the follow through is often hard for us fire people with dominant element fire. So the fact that I stuck with this podcast still amazes me, honestly. And in a way, I didn't expect it, but on the other hand, I did expect it from myself. So somehow, despite all the challenges, I found a way to keep going. So enough about that. Let's dive into this anniversary episode, because I want to talk about something completely different with you, not about podcast health necessarily. I want to talk a bit about something that I was recently playing with and what most likely will influence this podcast and my business from here on out more and more. So as you know, the podcast is called Chaos to Peace with Conny, because that's also my business that is called From Chaos to Peace Consulting. And for years already, I'm saying in a few minutes a day keeps the chaos away. And so while I was researching for episode 252 called Why a Few Minutes a Day is Clutter-Clearing Magic, I came across the term chaos magic. And it's actually a scientific term, but also a spiritual term. So, but this is just a little side note, because I'm not really talking about the chaos magic on this podcast, but it was part of it. So also, winding back a little bit more, even when I was releasing the episodes around the animal ally and the dominant elements, which were episodes 235 to 240, I started to realize that what I help people with is a form of spiritual organizing. And with spiritual organizing, I mean we are mindful about what we're doing. We take a purposeful approach. We take purposeful actions. We look at the bigger picture. We look how the environment affects us. We don't fight the clutter. We focus on the light, on the good, so to speak. We focus on what's already working, and we're trying to expand that rather than fighting the clutter, right? And we also work with our innate nature instead of against how we tick. So this is all what I'm standing for. And by doing some research, I realized I could call this spiritual organizing or spiritual clutter clearing. And then something else popped up again that I'm also playing with for a while already. I always wanted to have an acronym for chaos and for peace. For some reason, I just felt like that would be so cool to have, and it just wouldn't materialize. I couldn't get it done. And then all of a sudden, about a month ago, so somewhere in mid-January, I had a breakthrough. And so here I want to share this a little bit with you. This might not be the absolute final version, but this is what came through kind of like in a download, to speak it in a little bit woo-woo way, but it was just like all of a sudden it was clear. So when I say from chaos to peace, what I mean is from clutter, holding all opportunities stagnant, to proactive, easeful, aligned, committed experience. So let's start with the word chaos, which right now is the acronym for clutter, holding all opportunities stagnant. And then the word peace, which is the acronym for proactive, easeful, aligned, committed experience. Then this duo together really creates a before and after narrative. It describes the journey from chaos to peace that I take my clients through, right? And it conveys the transformation I want to guide you and my clients through when I work with my clients or when I talk with you on a podcast here. It reflects the shift from being stuck in chaos and clutter to living in more peace and in a more supportive environment. So let's unpack this a bit more, because maybe I confused you more with what I was talking about it now, because it might have been a bit quick. So chaos means clutter holding all opportunities stagnant. So the C in chaos stands for clutter, that disrupts your space and distracts your mind. The H in chaos stands for holding. It's holding on to things that drain our energy, but it's also the clutter, the C, the C in the first letter from chaos, right? The clutter that is holding us or you stuck in a space or in a place, like whether that's in your mind or in your physical or in your digital space, right? Then the A in chaos stands for all. It's all encompassing. And that makes it overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming and stressful to be in chaos or to be surrounded by clutter, whether that's physical, digital clutter, or in your mind, mental clutter, or in your heart, emotional clutter. Okay, and then the O in chaos stands for opportunities. So the chaos really keeps us often from seeing and from seizing new opportunities, from taking advantage of new opportunities, because we're already so stressed out and overwhelmed. There is no energy left that we could actually see and seize an opportunity, right? And then the S in chaos stands for stagnant. This is again, like the chaos and the clutter traps us in a cycle of inaction because we don't have the energy to get out of it. We don't have the bandwidth to do anything about it. And so it keeps us stuck and stagnant. Okay, here again, a little bit shorter. So chaos, clutter, holding all opportunities stagnant. So it blocks our energy, our growth, and our possibility. C is clutter, which disrupts our space and mind. H is holding onto things that drain our energy. A is all encompassing and overwhelming us with too much to manage. O is opportunities. It keeps us from seeing and seizing these opportunities. And S for stagnant traps us in a cycle of inaction and keeping us stuck and stagnant. So understanding chaos is understanding that chaos represents a state of disarray where opportunities are overshadowed by clutter, both physical, mental, digital, emotional, right? This clutter manifests itself in these forms, in physical and digital clutter, in disorganized spaces that hinder our productivity and creativity. It manifests in mental clutter when we are overwhelmed by thoughts and distracted by anything and everything, and it prevents us from focus and clarity. And then the emotional clutter, which are the unresolved feelings and the stress that is created by this disarray and by this chaos. And then it creates, on top of it, a sense of stagnation and almost like you want to give up. It's like you can't get out of it, right? And in this state, people often really feel trapped and unable to make progress in their personal or in their in their can I say it, in their personal or in their professional life. And now, just as a funny little side note, so this is what the download was, what chaos actually, what I mean with chaos, and this nice acronym now that I figured out, clutter, holding all opportunities stagnant. And I can talk about this more, but what I'm working on now is on 4 variations of this chaos acronym to align them with the 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water, that I'm talking about too, right? With the animal ally and the dominant energy and all this, and how this applies to people with dominant energy in fire or earth or air or water. But I'm not really ready to talk in more detail about this. Just stay tuned for future episodes. But I wanna figure this out. I'm hopefully getting another download how to figure this out, how I can make sure the acronym works for each of the 4 types, right? And it's intentional and really helpful for you, and not just a fun acronym just because Conny wants to have an acronym. So now let's shift to peace, right? Before this episode gets too long. We want to go on a journey from chaos to peace. And so we're transitioning from, so the question, of course, is how do we go on a journey and how do we transition from chaos to peace? And it involves a conscious effort, right? It does involve a conscious effort to create a more structured and supportive environment. And so here is each component of peace that contributes to this transformation. The P in peace stands for proactive and purposeful. We need to be intentional and take initiative in our daily actions and in how we set up our environment. And this is also where my new moon intention setting focus comes in, right? In being proactive and purposeful. And being proactive means taking initiative and anticipating challenges before they arise. It involves setting clear goals and priorities, developing a plan of action to address potential obstacles, what a lot of people forget when they're setting goals and intentions. They forget that there will be lots of obstacles, right? And then the third thing is regularly assessing progress and making adjustments as needed. So tweaking, right? So this is P for in peace. Then the E in peace stands for easeful and empowered. We want to use our innate strengths to do this in an easeful, aligned way so we can feel empowered. And that's where my element quiz comes in, for example. That's why I talk about fire, earth, air, and water personalities or types of people, right? Because an easeful approach encourages a sense of calm, and it's also more simple then if it's easeful and aligned with how you tick. So then we create decluttered physical spaces to create a certain atmosphere that we need. We practice mindfulness and stress reduction techniques, right? And then we embrace a balanced lifestyle that prioritizes well-being, because I often talk about clearing clutter is self-care and self-love. Then the A in peace stands for aligned actions. After we align the way we do things with how, according to how we tick, we want to align our actions to reflect our values and our priorities. Again, there is the new moon intention setting process that helps us getting clear on our values and on our priorities. And the element quiz helps us to take the aligned actions. So alignment refers to making sure that actions and values are in harmony, like identifying core values within your life and your business for yourself, and then aligning your daily activities with them. Like you can't just say my values are this and then act completely different, then they're not in alignment, right? Surrounding yourself then with supportive and like-minded individuals is also part where we can improve the aligned actions. And then engaging in activities that resonate with your personal passions and purpose, where again, this is where the element quiz comes in. This is where, when we do the new moon intention process, it's actually digging a little bit deeper. It's not just writing down some goals and going with it and focusing on them. We actually want to make sure it aligns and resonates with our personal passion and purpose. And it makes sense to actually achieve those goals, right? And then the C in peace stands for committed and consistent. We need to and want to have dedicated effort, meaning we are committed to it. We dedicate effort towards meaningful improvements. That's our priorities and our values but we can do this in a few minutes a day. That's where the consistency part comes in, right? So commitment is the dedication to maintaining the peace state, which involves establishing routines that promote consistency and discipline. Also establishing routines that help you create supportive environments rather than keeping your sabotaging routines, for example. It's also holding yourself accountable for your personal growth, for your development, and actually holding yourself accountable for what you said you want to do, to actually do it. And then it's continuously seeking opportunities for learning and for tweaking. And I don't mean with seeking opportunities for learning by going out and learning some other things and getting all distracted. I mean learning from your own experience, whether it's working or not, learning how you tick and what works with how you tick and how you do things, and learning from, okay, you thought you tick this way, but then you realize, oh, actually, that's not how I can create a supportive environment. I need to tweak it a little bit. And then by tweaking it, we're improving the process, and we're getting better and better, and we're getting better and better results, and we're getting quicker and quicker to the result, to the result and to the goal and to the intention that we have. And then the E in peace stands for the result that we then get. It's we experience equanimity. By doing all this, we cultivate and experience peace, harmony, and eventually we realize that this all is really an act of self-care and self-love, because we're so much less stressed, less overwhelmed. We have so much more clarity. We have purpose. We have direction. So we are experiencing equanimity. And I actually Googled what equanimity means. I love the word, but I wanted to make sure I tell you what it means. So equanimity comes from the Latin word equanimitas, which is a combination of equus, I probably pronounced that wrong, but equus means even or equal. And the second part of the word is animus, meaning mind or spirit. So it literally means evenness of mind. Or how I talk about it is peace of mind. And then also peace of space when you have a supportive space, as well as peace and profit if your finances are also in an orderly fashion, elegant finances, I call them too, and don't stress us out, right? So to repeat this peace acronym in a little bit more condensed version is peace means proactive, easeful, aligned, committed experience. It's P for proactive and purposeful. So be intentional and take initiative in daily actions. E for easeful and empowered. Use your innate strengths to create flow, to make it easier. That's where the element quiz comes in. Aligned action. We want to ensure our actions reflect our values. That's where the new moon intention process comes in, right? C is for committed and consistent. We dedicate effort towards meaningful improvements. And that's, again, where both the new moon intention process and the element quiz comes in. And then the result is we experience equanimity. we cultivate more peace, harmony, and self-love, and then we experience more peace, harmony, and self-love. Okay, and so here we end up at the conclusion. To go from chaos, which is clutter holding all opportunities stagnant, to peace, which is proactive and purposeful, easeful and empowered, aligned actions, committed and consistent, leads to experience equanimity. So the journey from chaos to peace is not merely about eliminating clutter. That's what I always say. Like, there's so much more to clutter. It's not about eliminating clutter. It's about creating and fostering a proactive, easeful, aligned, and committed experience in all aspects of our life and business. And by embracing this transformation, you can really unlock your potential, and then you have the energy to seize opportunities when they come along. And that creates and cultivates a more fulfilling experience. And this shift, of course, requires intention and effort. But the rewards of living in peace are immeasurable, right? And by living in peace, I mean you are centered in yourself and you're living in peace within yourself and within your immediate environment. Because remember, you have no influence what happens in the crazy world out there. The only thing you can do is from within, from inside out, create more peace in your life. So, to end this episode, to wrap it up, and to reflect again on these 5 years, this has been a journey of ups and downs, but it has also been a journey of getting clear for myself what I actually stand for. Like 5 years ago, I wasn't so clear on how I want to talk about how I help people. So talking for 5 years, once a week with you here on the podcast about how I help people, how I see it, how I see clearing clutter, that it's not about rules but principles, that it's more about intention, about focus on the positive rather than the clutter, how to tweak and make sure you have boundaries so the clutter doesn't come too close to you, and then expand these boundaries out and create this peaceful environment. I couldn't have done it probably without this podcast. I wouldn't have talked a lot about how I see these things. But again, the fact that I'm still here 5 years later and 255 episodes later is still something I'm truly proud of, but I'm also surprised at myself and amazed at myself. But I wouldn't be here without you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for downloading episodes. Thank you for following the podcasts and for supporting this podcast and its mission. And to end, if I could have a little wish for my anniversary and also for my birthday that is coming up, I would like to wish that I could hear a bit more from you. I'd love to know more what you think about how I see clearing clutter, how I talk about it here on a podcast. I would like to hear more what questions you have and what topics you would love me to cover here on the podcast. And I also have a fun idea. I want to bring some of you onto the podcast. Imagine joining me for an episode, bringing a chaos challenge that you are facing to me, being on air, and we're brainstorming together how to find a solution that works for you, an intentional journey from chaos to peace for you, for your challenge that you're facing. So if that sounds like something you'd love to do, let me know. There is a link in the show notes on how to reach out to me. As I don't have a intake form or anything crazy yet. I want to see first whether you're interested. So you can either reach out to me on that link in the show notes, or you can also DM me on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, you find me under I am Conny Graf. That's my handle there. And there's also a link to my website. There's a link to my Facebook profile. So you can just DM me wherever it's easiest for you, right? Or you go to the link in the show notes and you send me a message like that. Okay, now let's wrap this up. Here's to 5 years of Chaos to Peace. Yippee! I'm proud of me. I'm proud of you. And let's toast to many more. Hopefully, my determination and bullheadedness to do this every week stays strong. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Have an amazing week. Talk to you next time. Take good care and be safe.